Go.
Ooh. Hey everybody, sorry about that glitch, and welcome to Writer Mother Monster. I'm your host, Lara Ehrlich, and our guest tonight is writer Elle Nash. Before I introduce Elle, I want to thank you all for tuning in and let you know that you can now listen to Writer Mother Monster as a podcast on all major audio platforms, or read the interview transcripts at your leisure, all on writermothermonster.com. If you enjoy the episode, please also consider becoming a patron or patroness on Patreon. Please also chat with us during the interview. Your comments and questions will appear in our broadcast studio, and we'll weave them into our conversation. Now I'm excited to introduce Elle. Elle Nash is the author of the novel Animals Eat Each Other, which was featured in the Oprah Magazine and hailed by Publishers Weekly as a complex, impressive exploration of obsession and desire. A small collection of stories, Nudes, is forthcoming from SFLD Books in spring 2021. Her short stories and essays appear in Guernica, The Nervous Breakdown, Literary Hub, The Fanzine, New York Tyrant, and elsewhere. She is a founding editor of Witchcraft Magazine, a fiction editor at Hobart Pulp and Expat Press, and runs an annual workshop called Textures. Elle has one child, and she describes writer motherhood in 3 words as boundary building, productive. Now, welcome, Elle.
Hi, thanks so much for having
Elle.
me on.
Thank you so much for joining me. I'm excited to talk with you about writer motherhood and about, I'm going to try to hold it up here in the mirror image, Animals Eat Each Other, your amazing, tight, vicious novels. So let's just get started by, I want to ask you, who lives in your house?
I currently live with my parents and my partner and my child. We moved here right at the beginning of the pandemic. Didn't think it was going to be a long-term thing, but unfortunately we're still here. So.
And how old is your child? You said you have a daughter?
Yeah, she's toddler age. She just turned 3 this year.
Yeah, and before the interview, we were comparing notes because my daughter's 4, and I remember the 3-year-old period pretty well, that sort of wild time when they're learning that they have a willpower and expressing themselves. So you're kind of right in the thick of that toddlerhood.
Yeah, definitely. Like, I think the thing with toddlers is that they're just learning that there's things they can control about their world, and they really want to do anything to exert that control. And so it can be tough, but I spend a lot of time really pushing her to be as independent as possible, because I think that really helps temper a lot of that desire, when she feels like she can control certain parts of her world, because there's a lot that she can't, that kids can't control, which is super frustrating, and I think that's where the brunt of a lot of that difficulty comes from.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It must be so hard not to be able to control your surroundings, like to eat when you want to eat or go to the bathroom when you want to go to the bathroom. It's just the most basic human rights that you kind of have to learn how to do as a child.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's tough too, because they're just learning how to communicate, and they don't necessarily have all the words or the nuance to communicate exactly what they're feeling and that sort of thing too. There's just so much inside them that they're trying to get out, so a lot of that just seems really tough.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Did you always know you wanted to be a mother, or was it something that snuck up on you?
No, I never, I don't know. I never grew up having these thoughts of being a wife or being a housewife or getting married or even being a mom or anything like that. Really for a long time. And I think, I don't remember when it was, but I think around the time I was 26, I remember I was doing yoga a lot, and I was really burnt out at my job, and some of my friends in my yoga class, one friend, she was a nanny, and I was man, that would be just a really nice job to have. You know, I'm like, that just seems so much easier than like what I'm doing with my life, which is not, the nannying is also like really difficult, but it's like grass is greener syndrome. And then I don't know, I just felt like I just started to have like this really strong drive for that. Like it felt right, you know?
Mhm.
But of course, I think I was still scared for like a couple of years before I really jumped in, and was like, okay, I'm ready to be a mom now.
What do you remember what the turning point was? Was there like a specific instant that you knew that it was time, or did that kind of creep up on you as well?
No, I never thought. I think if I had waited to be ready, it probably never would have happened. Like, I
Yeah.
think it was just one of those things where I kept thinking, like, when is going to be the right time? And it was like, you know, oh, maybe I should have my finances in order, or maybe I should wait until this or that. And like, frankly, like, it's never gonna feel that way.
Yeah.
And it never felt that way. So I just kind of had to jump into it, you
No, we
know?
did the same thing. My husband and I, we were married for 8 years before we finally had a child because it was something I was like, and I'm a planner, so I was like, I don't know how to plan for this. I don't know when the right time would be or what needs to align in order for this to make sense. And everyone who I knew who was a mom said the same thing that you just said. It's like there will never be a right time. You just kind of have to jump into
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, and it was tough because at the time when I was like wanting, like when I first felt like I was wanting to be a mom, I was having like such a hard time with work. It was really affecting my mental health.
Hmm.
And like I had made the decision to change my profession. It was like right after my book got picked up by Dzanc. And like I couldn't, like mentally, like I could not handle like working in the office I was working in the environment anymore. So I quit my job and started going back to retail. I worked at a grocery store for a while, and we just tried to make ends meet, you know, because I was
Hmm.
like, I just can't do this. And um it was like while I was working in that office when I had that, where I was like, I can't imagine like being a mom this way. Like I can't imagine working full time, and trying to like manage a household and like manage a relationship, and be a mom all at the same time. It just seems so difficult. Like I don't know how working moms like keep it all together, you know. Although now I am like a working mom, and you just like figure it out, you know.
Hmm.
But yeah, at the time it was just definitely like I did not feel ready for it. So
Yeah, and your daughter, so was that right around the time that your daughter was born when your book was picked up?
no, well, no,
What
that
was
was
the timing
yeah,
there? Yeah.
that was in 2016. Yeah, and then we ended up moving to a really small town in Northwest Arkansas because we were like, we're just going to scale back on our living costs because we were living in the city and
Yeah.
we weren't getting anywhere, and we were just like, we just need to like restructure and live smaller, and focus on like I wanted to focus on like my mental health and writing, and my husband wanted to find just like a better job. Um, and so when we moved there, I was working as a barista. He was job hunting. We were scraping by. Like, I had to go on Medicaid. We would go to food banks and stuff occasionally, but we made it work. And I actually think I was happier, like at that time anyway. And that's actually when I think that was roughly like a year or so later when I turned in like the final draft of my manuscript for animals like the day before I went into the hospital to give birth.
Oh
Yeah.
my gosh.
So it was like kind of all, yeah.
Yeah, it all happened. Yeah, it's interesting to look back too because it's obviously you didn't now you have the benefit of hindsight and you can sort of see how things aligned in order to make it possible for you to do all of these things. But I'm sure at the time it felt overwhelming. What were you doing before the grocery store? You said you were in an office job.
Yeah, I did like I was working as a marketing manager and a proposal manager for a construction company.
Hmm.
So they would do like civic contracts, like you know, people who build light rails and that kind of thing. So
Yeah.
like private companies that do that. I worked for a company like that. And it's I mean, proposal writing is like it's a really like decent paying job, but it's very tedious and it's very feast and famine. And like you're writing these proposals that are like it's upon you to win these like $1 million contracts. So it's a lot of pressure and it's not commission. So you're not even getting to see like the amount of money that you're pulling in for this company, you know, so it can be very it can just be very tough to like do that kind of job, you know.
Yeah, and try to write as well, right? So you were writing your manuscript at the time. What was that balance like before you brought kids into the picture or your daughter came into the picture? What was it like balancing that full-time job and the novel that you were working on?
Yeah, you know, it was a lot different because I think I spent time like allowing my inspiration to come to me, you know, or like I would write like when I just felt like it, you know, or if I didn't feel like writing, I wouldn't work on it. And it took me 5 years, I think, from like beginning to end to like write that full first novel. And it's a really short novel anyway, you know, so it was kind of like this like on and off sort of thing.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but it's funny because when I look back on it, I was like, when I was experiencing working full time and trying to write, I was like, oh, this is so hard. Like, I'm never gonna want to really do my full time job, and writing is what I truly want to do. Like, I want to write full time, et cetera, et cetera. And like, I was always like, my job is in the way of it. But like, after having been through like multiple iterations of organizing my life, like with writing and stuff, honestly, like it doesn't change. Everything feels like an obstacle, even when you like have the time for it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm kind of like, well, it wasn't that bad, like when I was experiencing, like in comparison to like the type of schedule that I experienced like now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I feel the same way. I look back at when I was working full time and writing a novel that didn't end up selling many years ago. And now I'm like, oh, I was sitting at coffee shops for hours, like writing and reading. Um, and like my life just doesn't look like that anymore, especially now with the pandemic, of course. But, back when we could sit in coffee shops.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, so walk me through then once your daughter entered the picture. So you finished the manuscript of the book and sent it in, and then she was born. What was life like after that?
Like newborn life is like really hard. And it's like I have a lot of sympathy and empathy for people who like new parents who are like really excited about having a baby and then like kind of go through like the first like few weeks and stuff. It's the hugest adjustment. Like I just don't miss it at all, even though babies are like really cute. But like I just remember like I think it was like the fifth night um where I hadn't slept really, like really literally had not slept like for like 5 days. And it was like 4 in the morning and my daughter woke up and she was like crying and like hungry and I like literally like burst into tears.
Yeah.
And like my husband ran into the room and he thought like something terrible had happened because I just cracked. Like I literally lost my mind. Which is like kind of funny to like think about now. I don't know why. It's just like really funny like looking on it. But it was just like it was like kind of pretty much an adjustment. But I don't know, like having the ability to like stay home with her though has made things like so much easier because I went on maternity leave from the coffee shop I was working at, and like by the end of the 6 weeks, I was like, this is not enough time. Like it's really not. And so again, we were just like, we will just work to, you know, like make ends meet, do whatever we have to, really, so that way, like I could stay home and like just take care of her and stuff like that. So
Yeah. No,
yeah.
I think that's amazing. And 6 weeks is not long enough, and neither is 12 weeks yeah, paternity leave in this country is just miserable. But
Yeah.
I'm glad you were able to figure out a way to do what you wanted to do. Were you writing during that time? And if not, at what point did you start writing again?
Yeah, that's a good question. I really can't remember at what point I started writing regularly. I think like maybe she was like 6 months old. And I had been working on this manuscript. And I was kind of in the fog of like breastfeeding and stuff too. Like there's just something hormonally about it that made me feel like not as sharp, you know,
Yeah.
like I don't know, like I was just like I just don't feel like as with it like as I used to be. And that's a combination of like exhaustion and having this new person always be around you too. And like there's like this weird like mind melding thing that happens where like your identities kind of like fuse, which I think is like on purpose so you can understand and know what your baby needs, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And like I kind of had trouble like like kind of breaking out of it when I was working on this manuscript. And then I remember I'd like sent it to a friend, and she had said too that she didn't like it very much, and I just was so like, I was like, I cannot be intellectual like right now. That's how I feel. So like I just kind of sat down and I told myself that I was gonna write like my basic bitch novel. Like I was like, I'm just gonna write a mainstream novel. I'm gonna learn how to do it. I'm gonna learn how to write something with plot from like beginning to end. So I like started doing that and I planned it out. And in like December of 2018, I sat down and I wrote that novel in like 11 weeks. And I just woke up at like 4 or 5 in the morning. She was starting to have more regular naps. And so I would just like write every time that she was asleep too, like during the day. And like I just committed to it. And like, that's how I got my first draft like of it done.
Oh my gosh.
So it was definitely like a lot of like not sleep, you know. Like,
and that was the first draft of which one? Of Animals or
no, that was the first draft of one that I have sent out on submission right now.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of like, I guess it would still be considered like a work in progress because it's not out in the world yet. But yeah, I was like just determined to just try and like get it done.
So you say that book was one that you planned in advance to have a plot and so on. But I would say, and I'm just going to hold it up again, Animals Eat Each Other. Here it is. There's certainly a plot in this one, although I see what you mean, that it's certainly not mainstream. Like you said, it's slim, but that doesn't mean that it's not a complex and thought-provoking story, which I found it very much to be. Do you think you could have written, well, actually, I want to ask if you think you could have written this book today now that you're a mother, but first, could you just tell us a little bit about it? Tell us about the story of Animals.
Sure. Animals Eat Each Other follows a 19-year-old narrator who has just graduated from high school, and she enters into a relationship with this couple. And then the whole thing goes pretty much terribly wrong. So it's like the basic gist of it. It's a little bit like, I guess it's a little bit like a coming of age story because of the time, you know, that it takes place and that sort of thing.
Yep.
So yeah. As far as reading it today, that's a good question. I don't know because I haven't like read it and gone back to like read it or read parts of it in quite a while. But I think yes, I could, and I would actually do it better. Like because the process that I've gone through these last 2 years of getting this next novel kind of ready and stuff like that. I just think I've learned a lot more about writing and like how I look at my writing, and I think it would be better if I rewrote it.
Wow. Wow. So I have so many questions, but I'll start with, what would you write differently? What would you do differently?
I don't know, honestly. I think like maybe I would expand it more. Maybe like sometimes I think when I've read it, there's parts where I'm like, I know I could have like just written it in a more like with better voice or something. I don't know. It's hard to say. Like I think maybe now when I look at my stuff now feels more polished. So maybe like that's the difference. And I think sometimes people prefer like stuff that's more raw and gritty. So it's hard to say, you know.
Yeah, I mean it's hard to say, but something I really loved about it is that it's raw and gritty, and it doesn't, this is going to sound wrong, but it doesn't feel polished. Not that it doesn't feel like not that it doesn't feel literary or that you are an exceptional writer, but it feels like the character is searching still and doesn't have that polish that comes from experience. So I think it felt right for the character. The voice felt appropriate to me. Yeah, but so something that you explore through this book and that the character thinks a lot about and even speaks about is identity and what it means to be an individual or a self versus an other. And she allows this couple to rename her Lilith, right? And she sort of erases herself or lets herself become subsumed into this relationship. And I'm interested in the fact that you mentioned that motherhood is kind of like that, right? Like you become merged with this other identity. So can you talk a little bit about, I don't have a specific question there, except that it seems that you're very interested in identity and selfhood.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know why with motherhood, but it does seem like that's the case. And I feel like it's something I don't want to speak to like a universal experience, but it does seem like new moms really struggle with like identity and also like feeling like their own person when they are new moms. And some moms struggle with this like for a long, like a lot longer. And part of this is like when moms feel guilty for taking time out for themselves or that sort
Mm-hmm.
of thing. Like I do see that a lot. And I think personally I experienced that a lot too, where I felt bad for asking, for example, for time to write on the weekends or something like that. Especially because it was easy for me to consider that I'm staying at home and that I don't have a job, even though like I'm literally running an entire household and I'm taking care like of a tiny human. Like it was easy for me to think that like I didn't deserve the time because well there's like all this time already, even though like that time is actually spent like doing other types of things. So like I have personally had to go through this process of seeing my alone time as valuable and like important for me and setting those boundaries. And I just think maybe like with animals too, what I was exploring is a lot of that, like people not being able to set boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's a gray line there where I believe I believe in everybody's personal agency, like in a person deciding what's right for themselves in terms of what their boundaries are. But like in a coming of age story, for example, or in like this life experience with like a new human, like those boundaries can become really blurred and it can be really difficult to figure out like where that boundary really is, or like asking for that extra space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. How logistically do you do it? How do you carve out the time for the writing or claim it as your own? Like if, for people who are listening who maybe are struggling to do that.
Yeah, before the pandemic, it was definitely a lot of waking up at like 4 or 5, in the morning, and then writing whenever she was asleep. Just keeping like I would just keep my laptop open on the kitchen counter too. If she was like eating breakfast, right, then I would like I'd have my laptop open and I would just be like typing because I had like my goal, like I had my plot that I had written and I was writing from beginning to end when I did that first draft.
Mm-hmm.
And so my goal was just like to get it done. So I guess like the first step is having really clear goals. And the second step is like not giving your excuses if you come to like a blank page, like being able to write whenever you can.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the third thing was also just like making it known to my partner where I was like, I want to write for 4 hours on Saturday morning, and this is what I'm going to do. And just like trying to negotiate that and making it known like it's really important for me on multiple levels, like mental health, happiness, like life goals, like all those things, and just knowing that. But it also means being pragmatic about like your time. So for example, this year I've been doing a lot of writing and also a lot of teaching and editing. And so I don't have time for other self-care activities. Like I haven't gone running or done anything like working out or anything like an entire year, but it's just because I don't have the time, and like that's just going to be how it is some years.
Mm-hmm.
Because I also need to spend time with my daughter and I need to be sure like I'm still there for her, and I also need to manage other aspects of like my living situation here too.
Yeah.
So
No, I think
No, I think
that's.
that's.
Oh, sorry, I'm
Sorry,
getting an echo here. Can you hear the echo? Or oh no, now we're okay. Sorry about that. Um, yeah, no, I think that's so smart, and I love the idea of prioritizing because I think we hear so often that we can do it all, and we get that message, and then when we can't do it all, it feels terrible, and we wonder like, what's wrong with me that I can't manage to do all of the things that I want or feel I should be doing all at the same time. So I love just knowing that maybe sometimes we will not exercise for a year. I certainly have not exercised for a year.
yeah.
Um, yeah. and that's just how you get things done sometimes. And maybe other times you won't write for a month, but you'll exercise and feel a little, better in your body. And it's hard to reconcile though.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely requires a balance, but it is tough because like it's very easy. Um, for me personally, it's very easy for me to put a lot of pressure on myself for not meeting like my personal goals. And that was like one of the things that I kind of learned when I was like in that 11-week process of finishing that first draft, where I was like, I'm gonna do this. Like I felt really strongly about it. But some days though, like I literally would only get like maybe a paragraph down, and I just couldn't get any further. And I had to just sit and say like, okay, like it's fine that you didn't do this, just like wake up the next day and do it again. And so it's kind of this, you have to have like a good balance of being disciplined and being clear with what you want, but also like not beating yourself up when you don't do it, because I think the beating yourself up part of it can contribute to like having low self-esteem and stuff, and then it can impede you from being able to reach your goal overall, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, to let yourself spiral into feeling like because I didn't write today, I'll never write again, or I've failed the project in whole, when really it's just one day and
Yeah.
go on to the next day.
Hmm.
Yeah. Can you tell us anything about the book that you finished in the 11 weeks?
I don't want to reveal too much about it, so
Okay.
I kind of want to keep it the excitement in, so that way, like, hopefully, I can announce it like soon.
I know the feeling. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's totally fine. Um, is it very, well, can you tell us, is it very different from Animals Eat Each Other? You mentioned that it's a more plotted novel, more mainstream.
Yeah. Well, like, I know I said I was like writing this mainstream novel, but now when I kind of like look at it, I'm just like, I don't really think it's very mainstream. Like the finished product of it, I'm not really sure, like per se, because I've been getting some kind of like mixed feedback from publishers who've been rejecting it. But it is a lot different, I would say. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not sure, like it just ventures into kind of like new territory. It does have something to do with motherhood to a degree. So,
Mhm.
like, and pregnancy. So,
Interesting.
but it's
Yeah.
definitely, I think I would say it's a bit different than what I normally write.
Yeah. I'm also interested in just that word mainstream and from the publishing side, because I feel like Animals is such a distinctive piece. And I'm going to put up let's see, a great comment here from Chris Bernard. She says, I think your writing in Animals has a very intimate voice that almost feels like I'm walking beside them, part of the circle. As a reader, I love feeling like the characters are three-dimensional right away. And I totally agree with that. That's a great comment. And hi, Chris. So I want to ask you just about what your goals are when you set out to write a book, whether it's Animals or Nudes that's forthcoming or the novel that you just finished. I know some writers set out to write a book that will make the New York Times bestseller list, right? And some writers, like I feel more like this way, where I just have a story that I really need to tell, and I don't really care if it's something that would make, the bestseller list or not. And hopefully it would resonate with a group of like-minded people. So where do you fall on that spectrum?
I would say that, like, I mean, my goal is to be able to make a living and like support my family. And so
Hmm.
I think like I would be lying if I said I didn't have some kind of dreams of like having my book be really big or go really far.
Sure.
But at the same time, like I know that most bestsellers don't tend to outlive their generation, and I think I'm also really interested in legacy to a degree. I don't know, like it's hard for me to like look like 10 or 20 years down the line and say like exactly do I want to be. Like I would say like I really don't want to peak until I'm like 60. And if it's like like if that's like kind of going to be like a slower path, where like maybe my book isn't going to break out like right away or something like that, and then I just have to keep working at it. Honestly, like I'm okay with that. Like I just want to be able to like eat and have health care, you know?
Yeah.
Um and like I don't know, like I kind of also am like, I would hope that like I am a good enough writer that my book doesn't become the kind of overhyped sort of thing that I tend to see, where people like really hype up a book and then they get up reading it and you're like, this is just not very interesting or good. Like I want my work to be interesting. I want my work to be compelling and speak to people, you know.
Yeah.
Like when I was setting out to like write this like mainstream novel, I was like, yes, like I want it to be traditionally plotted, and like I have my agent and I want to see if I have a chance at landing at a big 5. But I just don't know if it's going to end up being that way, because I also want to stay like true to like what I think is interesting about the story itself and like what it says about like power and violence and motherhood and all kinds of things. You know, I don't want to change those things. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. No, and I love all of the themes that you just mentioned, power and violence and motherhood. I think we're alike in that way. Those are themes that drove the book that I just finished up over the holidays, and is now with my agent. And it's this feeling of, well, I wonder if it's the same for you, but I had this just urge to write something that was violent and powerful and about motherhood. And that's where the book started, where it was like, I just need to sort of give voice to those feelings. And then the story came from that. Where did the story come from for you? Were those sort of the feelings that created the seed of the novel?
Mm,
Or where did it start?
so, yeah, well, so in 2015, when I was living in Denver, there was this crime that occurred like really just north of where I lived, and like I don't want to give away too much about
No,
it,
that's
but
okay.
I thought about it and the person who perpetrated the crime for a really long time, and I just couldn't understand how the people around that person as well were able to not suspect like what was going on like in the person's mind and like what they were struggling with like mental health wise and all that stuff too. So that's what I really thought about for a while. Like I couldn't get the story out of my head, and so for me that's kind of what germinated it. And the other thing was that being pregnant like in Arkansas, which like I loved living there, people were really like wonderfully nice and stuff, but was fascinating is because it's very family oriented, because it is a bit more traditional out there, like conservative out there, and people would treat you like a very high class like citizen when you're pregnant, you know, like people would let me cut in line at the DMV, or everyone's like really nice to you when you're pregnant, and they're also really nice to you when you have like a brand new baby, like. And I just thought but it drops off when the baby is like older and no longer cute, you know. And I just find the way society treats pregnancy and pregnant women and what kind of like pressure that can put on a person, for example, who wants to be pregnant but isn't. I just thought that all of that was like very interesting. So that's really what drove me to like explore that. I also am really interested in the psychology of killing, because I don't feel like it's explored very much in fiction at all. And like just in terms of this crime I'm talking about, like I don't know, I just wanted to understand it more, you know? So that's really what started it for me.
Yeah, and that combination of factors and elements just sounds fascinating. It sounds like an awesome book, even though I don't quite know what it's about. I want to read that right away. Um, yeah, and congrats on finishing. Chris says
Thank
it's
you.
awesome, especially with everything else going on in your life. So, yeah, and where are you now? So you moved from Arkansas, and where are you living now?
Oh, my parents live in Colorado,
Okay,
so that's where I'm
yeah,
staying right now.
yeah.
Yeah.
So was that a culture shift moving from Arkansas to Colorado?
No, I mean I grew up here, but it's definitely the first few months being back like in your hometown that like you left like after high school is definitely like really freaky. Like it almost too like people still dress like it's 2005 here sometimes, so it did feel a little bit like going back in time. And I just kind of also like forgot how powerful the mountains are. Like growing up, I was like, oh, I never really even paid attention to them. And now that like I'm here, like every day I stare at this like mountain, I'm just like, holy shit, that's like a huge mountain. It's like majestic. I don't know why I didn't care about it before. So.
Has moving back to your hometown inspired you in some way or changed your craft or led you to think about writing, different themes or stories that you might be interested in telling?
Yeah, I'm actually writing a manuscript about the mountain in a way right now. Well, kind of like on and off. But I mean, my schedule definitely changed because of the pandemic in general, and I've been working a lot more and working from home, and so that's been like, a bit of a balance. So
Yeah, so tell us more about how the pandemic has, I guess, changed your life in the last year, moving back in with your parents. Luckily, my family, we moved probably 6 months before the pandemic from Boston back to Connecticut, about 15 minutes from my parents. So while we don't live with them, we see them every day. We have dinners together. They're downstairs watching my 4-year-old right now. So, and I also moved back to my hometown area. So um, it has been interesting for the last year to see what the pandemic has kind of done, particularly with families um, and I don't know, it feels almost like a return to that primal family unit of like grandparents and parents and children. But what has the last year been like for you?
yeah, it's been pretty similar. I'm really grateful that my mom has been around to watch my child a lot more, and I'm actually really happy because like I want my child to like experience her grandparents and stuff like that as much as she can as well. My husband also has been spending a lot of time, like a lot more time with her too, which has been great for both of them, I think, and also it's given me just like a lot more time to be able to like make more money and focus on teaching and trying to finish up the 2 manuscripts that I had this year, which was the novel that I was telling you about, and then also finishing the short story manuscript. So that aspect of it's been really good. I've probably been working too much because feels a little escapist, to be able to just like go in and like work like in these other worlds that aren't pandemic worlds, which has been nice. But it's definitely been a struggle to readjusting to being like in the same vicinity as my parents, and readjusting boundaries, and like trying to focus on good mental health. Like that's been a pretty big struggle this year. So
Yeah, no, I've heard that from so many guests too. Particularly, I mean, I've only been talking to writer moms, of course, but I think the pandemic has been particularly hard on mothers, as we've seen from articles everywhere, from like the New York Times and Washington Post, and that women are leaving the job force and have become teachers of their children. And I'm certainly grateful that my child isn't kindergarten age yet, and we don't have to, your daughter too. We don't have to like put them in the classroom and deal with that side of things, but it's been hard. Yeah. So let's see. Oh, I wanted to ask you too about your teaching. Let's see. I'm gonna mangle the name of it, but um, where is it? Textures, your annual workshop. So tell us about Textures, and then I also definitely want to hear about Witchcraft Magazine.
sure. Yeah, it's a right now how I envision it is like a 6-month workshop, and we meet on the internet once a month, and like trade feedback with other peers, and like in teaching it, I really try to focus on teaching in like indie lit fiction stories or novels or that sort of thing. And I don't know, it's just a workshop. I don't really know how to talk about it. I haven't prepared like my elevator pitch for it, but it's been really wonderful this year just because I've had this small cohort of students that I've been working with for a long period of time. And like we have a Discord server where we chat about literature and that sort of thing, and it's really made the year a lot better just to be able to keep focus at least once a month, like on fiction and what I like about fiction, and talking about like what we think about it and why certain things work and other things don't, and seeing students learn how to edit other people has been really wonderful too, because it's like you learn and become better through doing that too. So I'm really happy to be able to foster that kind of environment. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I ran it twice this year, but I think I may run it only once next year. So yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So last week I had a special episode about community for writer moms, and we can expand that a bit and just talk about community for writers. Why do you think it's so important? And you talked a little bit about this just now, but can we go a little bit deeper into why it's so important to have a writing community as a writer?
Well, it's just good to know. First, it's good to know like what other people are doing and writing, because I think that can inspire you. And it also can teach you more about your tastes as a writer, which will help sharpen how you write and like be more attentive to like how you're writing things. The other thing too is that like the real world kind of sucks, you know? So like people, like the world is not very nice, and it's very like it can just be really harsh and that sort of thing. And so I think having like a community of people who like are interested in like the wonderful aspects of art that you're interested into, is it just can make things feel like less lonely, which is really nice. You know, I'm always learning about like new writers who write like the most amazing stuff that like you would never find just like in a bookstore, or you know, like a Barnes and Noble, for example. You know what I mean? Like there's just so much interesting and experimental and transgressive stuff that comes out of like the indie community that I find like wonderful and fascinating. And I think that aspect makes it really special too. So
Yeah, definitely. I echo that. And Chris's comment, hell yes to indie publishers. Absolutely. And we have a question here from Tyler Byrne, who asks, how do you feel about being defined as a cyber writer sometimes?
Tyler, I do not like being a cyber writer. I am not a cyber writer. You can tell Jake Blackwood that.
So tell us, so what is a cyber writer? Who called you a cyber writer, and why don't you like being called?
You're gonna have to ask whoever invented it, like Corey. I don't even know if he's watching or anything like that. Jake Blackwood, they will know. There is
Okay.
a cyber writing manifesto somewhere out there.
Interesting. All right. I think this is homework for everyone listening. We're going to have to look this up and figure out what it is. Yeah, so let's talk about Witchcraft Magazine too. When did you found the magazine, and why, and what is it?
Sure. In I think 2014, I went to this reading to see Chloe Caldwell, and I met a poet there named Catch Breath, is how she goes by, and we both were just like really wanting to like start a reading series or do something in Denver, because we just didn't know a lot about the lit community out there, and I really wanted to start a zine. But then I realized that like I could like find like a printer and like print like actual like perfect bound books and stuff, instead of just like do a zine type thing. So I was a fiction writer and she was a poet, and it just seemed natural for us to like team up. So we teamed up and we started Witchcraft, and it's been really wonderful to just be able to like create this platform for people. Like we wanted work that was like this blend of somewhat witchy type of writing or like darker writing, and also stuff that was more gritty and like more raw, or work that was like more transgressive, which is what I really like. I like enjoy good transgressive fiction. So yeah.
For
So
anyone watching who doesn't know, what is transgressive fiction? How would you define it?
oh man, this is such a hard thing to say. Like you could probably write an entire philosophical paper on like exactly what transgressive fiction is. I would say like the easiest way to define it is just stuff that like generally it can explore taboos, or it like breaks like normal boundaries of what you would consider like normal life. You know what I mean? It takes the reader to a new place where they wouldn't expect necessarily to go. Transgressive fiction can make the reader question maybe their own like morals, or like the morals of greater society and that sort of thing. So
would you define yourself as a transgressive writer?
I don't know. for sure. I would say I would look up to transgressive writers, but maybe I'm just not there yet. Maybe I will. I don't know.
I always hate being asked this question because I can never think on the spot, but I'm going to ask you anyway. Are there some writers you could mention who you admire, particularly, let's say, transgressive writers?
Sure. This year I read a ton of Dennis Cooper, and I'm absolutely amazed by what he's able to do with fiction. I read Frisk in particular, which like blew my mind. Like I rarely feel uncomfortable or shocked or anything like that about anything that I read or watch, anything that I find on the internet. Like nothing is generally that surprising to me or offensive or anything like that. But when I read Frisk, I really did take a pause and I was like questioning myself reading it. And when I got to the end, I was like blown away because it was just very well done. So Dennis Cooper is one. I read Maurice Mayer for the first time this year. I read her short story book Heartbreakers, and that was really good too. So,
wow, just because this is sort of a tangent, but what is Frisk about? Something that managed to shock you when nothing else does?
I would say that Frisk is about a person who was exploring their penchant for violence without necessarily understanding whether or not they were violent.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna have to go find that immediately. I think that sounds. Okay, we have another question here from Tyler. Tyler, you have some good questions. Um, could you talk about some of the logistics of putting out the first Witchcraft magazine, the cost or the steps to put it out there that you hadn't expected? Anything you want to share?
Yeah. So I'm trying to think about how much it costs. Like, I think maybe we put in, like, me and Catch together, I think put in $1,000 total, like when we were first setting up, and that was like for the website, and for like I think we did some screen printing materials because we did like merchandise too, and then it was a couple $100s to do like the first print run. And the thing that caught me off guard actually was like the cost of shipping. For some reason, it was just like we didn't realize like how expensive shipping would be, shipping each like individual magazine out. So that was like kind of an unexpected thing. But God, it's hard to think because now we've been doing it for so long that I feel like I have it down pat. I think that the other thing that always takes longer than I expected to is just gathering, because we put it out once a year, so it feels a little bit like a yearly anthology, but like gathering every single piece that we put in it and then pairing it with art, doing layout, making sure all the bios are correct, making sure everyone's name is spelled properly. And then when we do promotion, I have to make sure that I'm capturing like everybody on social media and stuff so no one's left out. That part is I just always forget like how long and detailed that process can be. And it's a bit stressful because you don't want to leave anyone out. You don't want to spell anyone's name wrong. You don't want to have like typos in someone's work because it's really special and it means a lot to them too. And so, because that could be disappointing, right? If someone like finds like a mistake in their own piece in a print magazine, because you can't edit a print magazine once it's out, you know? So that's like I kind of forget about that process like every time.
Yeah, no, and as someone who is in marketing, I'm sure you are exceptional at it, and just all the complexities are that you pay particular attention to all of those complexities. So I have a question from my 4-year-old for you. When I told her you were coming on today and that you have a magazine about, well, called Witchcraft Magazine, she is obsessed with witches and wants to be a witch, and she asked if you can do magic.
Yeah, we can all do magic. It's pretty practical. Like even in a sorry, I'm gonna get really technical for a 4-year-old here, but
No,
like
I want to know. Yeah, I'll show her.
like I think everything that like we do in terms of ritual is kind of a form of magic. And even like when you're writing and you're creating a particular atmosphere in another person's mind, that's kind of magic. So it's very like practical type of thing that we kind of do every day, you know?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah, I
just,
love that.
yeah. Like I would even define, like I would say like the simplest definition of magic is putting your will out onto the world. And, you know, we do that a lot with art. We do that with like our intentions, you know, and a lot of different types of things. So.
Yeah. Putting your will out into the world, what have you gotten back from the world from your writing? So how have people responded to Animals Eat Each Other, to um, just your presence through social media, through all of what you put out there? What types of things have people come back to you with?
I have a lot of people tell me how much they related to my narrator, and like I guess just whenever people say really nice things about my book or when they connect with things that I write, I feel really lucky and special just to be able to have that happen. And it always means a lot to me, even though I think I say that every time someone compliments me, I'm like, thank you. That means a lot to me. It really does, like every time. And that has been really special. It's been really encouraging and really validating to spend a lot of time putting work into the world just to have people read it. And I mean, I think I would keep doing it if people didn't read it probably too, but just to like have that kind of feedback has been like just really it is encouraging. Like it pushes me forward. So
Absolutely. Do you hope that your daughter reads your books someday?
I don't know. It's hard for me to imagine like what she'll think like when she's older, whether she'll think she'll be like, oh, my mom is like a writer, this is like so lame, or if like she'll think it's like really cool. I don't know, like for sure. I've never really considered it. I've never thought of her as a person as part of an audience. I've never been exposed to a creative parent, so I don't know like I don't have like a baseline for what that experience is even like. But I do know that I hope that like her seeing me do something that I love, even like when I go back to having a full-time job and have to change my schedule and stuff. Like I'm not going to stop making room for writing in my life. And I just kind of hope that living that kind of way can demonstrate and encourage in her that she deserves that type of space too. Because like my parents kind of discouraged me from like pursuing a creative career. And so for me, it was like kind of like clawing my way like back to trying to like see it as valid. You know what I mean? So I
Yeah.
just want her to see that it's like a valid thing that you can do and that you can balance it and you can do both at the same time too. Like have a
Yeah.
job and still pursue like what your creative pursuits are.
Wow. Tell me a little bit more about how you clawed your way back to creative pursuits. So, did you know you wanted to be a writer when you were young and then sort of pushed it aside for a while, or how did that kind of come about?
Yeah, I was since high school. Well, maybe I was like in middle school. Like I think I was like 14 when I discovered LiveJournal, and I would like write poetry like every day, like really bad poetry, and I even found like an early community of like poet girls on this website called Diaryland, and we would just write and poetry and share poems with each other and stuff. Like in the early days of internet before social media, and like that's a really special time for me. I always like think about it. I'm actually still friends. Like I found and became friends with a girl that I had known from that age who was a poet, and she's still writing poetry. Her name is Katie Raditz. Yeah, and it's kind of cool, like looking back and being like, that was a long time ago, and like we're still doing it. But yeah, I was always like trying to explore creative writing, and um, my parents really pushed me to choose a major that would make money. So I went into journalism. Like I had initially actually wanted to be a hairstylist. Like I wanted to go to cosmetology school. But my dad pretty much was like, well, you're going to the college or you're going to the army. And I really was not going to go into the army. So I went to school for journalism. And then like got really into that. I did like reporting for a weekly for a little bit. I did PR, all the journalism related like type career fields. And then like I just kind of forgot. Like I stopped writing poetry and I stopped writing creatively, and I got swept up in just surviving, trying to like pay my rent and that kind of thing. And yeah, it wasn't until like 2013, I think, when I was like, I want to actually write fiction. Like I want to actually try and do this, and I want to learn how. And I started taking writing workshops. So just since then, like I didn't even think about like I didn't even know you could like submit to literary magazines, or like I didn't know how people could try to get published, you know, like I just didn't think about any of that stuff. And once I started taking writing workshops, I started becoming more exposed to it, and like from then I was like I'm gonna be really serious about this. So
Yeah. You know, I remember something similar in that I always wanted to be a writer, but it was when I started taking workshops and going to conferences and seeing and like meeting professional writers and learning about the steps in which the steps you need to follow, although everyone's journey is different, of course, but there are some sort of tangible things that you need to do, like write a draft and
yeah.
have people read it for you and things like that, that it became tangible for me, that it was like something I could do for a career. So it's interesting to hear you say something similar. What was it about the workshop, about taking workshops, that helped you to move toward a professional career in fiction?
I think it was just seeing writers who had been successful in what they were doing, and like you know, just looking up to them, admiring them and their work, and their passion also for teaching other people, that made me see that it was possible for me also. Like I was like, I could probably do this. I just have to keep trying at it, you know? Yeah.
Yeah. And we have just a couple minutes left, but I do have a final question for you. But first, is there anything that you want to talk about that I haven't asked you about? Anything that in the course of this conversation that sort of occurred to you and we skimmed over that you want to revisit? Or,
I don't know. I can't think
and
of
if not,
anything.
that's fine.
Yeah.
No, yeah. So my final question is just for listeners out there who are trying to balance everything and figure out how to devote themselves to a creative profession in the midst of child raising and working full time in a pandemic and all this kind of stuff. What sort of actionable advice would you offer a mother in that situation?
Um, oh, I don't know. That's so hard to think about. I guess I would just say to just continue to try like every day. And whenever you find yourself comparing yourself to whether other people like where they are, like if someone has a book announcement and like you kind of feel like saddened by like your own lack of that, just try to recognize that like what's happening is you're relating to that person because you want to be like where they are. Like that's a connection that you can have. And also that it's demonstrating to you that there is a pathway forward for you because you're relating to that person. That means that there's a way that you can also be successful, you know.
Yeah.
It's hard. It's like a balance of like not being too hard on yourself, but like continuing to like show up and try to do the work as much as like you can in a way. Accepting that sometimes like you do have to sacrifice certain elements of it, like, you know, if you want like that extra hour of writing time, then, you know, make your dinner really easy, like just be like low effort as possible, or you know, sometimes you do have to like avoid like sleep or something like that. I don't know, it's really tough. It's like sometimes I hate giving that advice because I also say like I don't like you know, contributing to the narrative that women can and should do it all either. Like if you don't want to and it's becoming like too difficult, like it's okay to like take breaks, especially because like when you first have a kid and when they're really dependent on you, like they're little for like a very short period of time. Like a human life is like 80 years and they're only little for like, I don't know, 8 years really, like, or at least 5 before like they go to school. And so like if you need to take that break and like spend that time with them while they're little, like that's 100% like okay. Like I found myself this year realizing maybe I'm spending too much time like working and like not enough time trying to like, you know, spend like really quality time with my kid. And so I'm like thinking about that because I'm gonna have to go back into the workforce anyway. I'm like thinking of like maybe I should be taking this time to just like slow down, like because she's only gonna be little for a very short period of time, and then I'm gonna be like 50 and she's like not gonna want to spend time with me or hug me anymore, and I don't want to like lose that. And that's okay, you know, like you have your whole life to work on your creative career. So
yeah, I think that's great. And I just love the message of it boils down to it's okay, right? Like whatever works for someone and whatever your passions and goals are, that's okay. And it's okay to take the time. And I also love that you mentioned finding or looking toward other writers and mothers you admire to sort of have a beacon toward what you might want to become. And I think that's so wise and particularly relevant for this podcast as well, because I would encourage everyone to reach out to the writers they admire. That's what why I sort of created this podcast, so I could do it, so I could talk to people like you who have these who have done things that I truly admire and I want to learn from. So I think that's a really great point as well.
Yeah, because that's kind of like how I found like my mentorships and friends too, is reaching out to people that I admired, and that's what helped me see that way forward too. Is
yeah, that it's actually possible. But thank you so much. I think that's a great note to conclude on. So I want to thank you, Elle, for joining me and taking time out of the craziness of life with a 3.5-year-old in a pandemic. So thank you so much again for coming on and talking about your work and your life with me. And yeah, and thank you all for tuning in. So you can watch this video again, listen to the show as a podcast, or read the interview transcript, all on writermothermonster.com. You can also buy Elle's book by visiting the bookshop link on writermothermonster.com, and there you will find books by all of our other authors for sale as well. And again, if you enjoyed the conversation, please consider becoming a patron or patroness on Patreon. That's how this series becomes possible. So thank you again. I'll stay on for a second so I can say goodbye, and we'll see you all next week.